And welcome to another episode of Experts Speak. I'm Michael DeLon. Today I am talking with Richard Matthews. Richard, thank you, sir, for spending some time with me and being my guest today.
Awesome. Glad to be here.
It's going to be a fun conversation. So, Richard, I met Richard a few months ago at a conference he and I were both at, and we struck up a conversation because he and I have very similar passions in lots of areas, inside business, outside business. But one of the most intriguing thing was not only does he help business owners create podcasts and build authority and all of that, which is really what we're going to talk about. What really intrigued me was the fact that you're what I call an itinerant entrepreneur, which means that Richard and his family drive around the nation in their big RV, and he does his work remotely. They homeschool their kids in the RV and all kinds of stuff. So that's probably for another episode. But I just thought that was really wicked cool. So I just want to talk about all kinds of things like that, especially the podcasting aspect. But tell us, Richard, how in the world did you get doing what you're doing today?
Well, the traveling part, my wife and I about 7 years ago decided, there was a bunch of stuff that just lined up, and we were able to move our house and our business and everything onto the road. And we've been traveling for 7 years. We had our fourth baby on the road. We've seen all 48 states. My youngest just turned 5. She's seen all 48 states, which is really cool. And we have 10x our business since we moved onto the road in the last 7 years, which is really cool. So anyways, it's all sort of part of the story, but we are currently in the process of selling the RV and buying a sailing yacht so we can start traveling port to port around the world and keep the travel up since we've seen the US. And we run our entire company virtually now. So we just hired staff member number 15. And so we have a virtual meeting space and we meet online regularly, and we run 100% remote company. We started doing it before it was cool, right? Because we started before COVID. Um,
Cool
so
before COVID. I love it.
yeah, it was cool before COVID, but to the push button podcast space, when we actually started traveling, I wasn't running push button podcasts full time. I actually wasn't running a podcast company at all. What I was running was a company that helped people build like their entire marketing stack around content education. And so it would be we'd help them figure out what they wanted to teach. We'd help them build their courses. We'd help them build their online conversion mechanisms, their virtual sales letters, their book. We'd help them build the mastermind. We'd help them build all the things that they needed to have like a really good offer in the marketplace. And we did that, 2 or 3 clients at a time for a percentage of sales. It was a really good thing. And that was called the Digital Alchemy Formula. And so it was ALCHEMY. It was a 7-step process that we walked through. And the why in the Digital Alchemy Formula was called Your Message Everywhere. And it was a playbook that was essentially what became push button podcasts. And I had this problem with my clients. And the problem was I would give them this playbook, and roughly 25% of them would take that playbook and then implement. And those clients all became millionaires. And then the rest of my clients wouldn't implement the playbook. And I was scratching my head being like, why won't you just do this work? It's really, really powerful if you'll do it over the course of time. I have other clients that prove that it works. And so I couldn't figure it out for the life of me why they wouldn't do it. And so then I decided that I would start my own podcast and figure it out. And so I started The Hero Show, which is a podcast that I just like today recorded episode number 252 for. So I sat down and I recorded the first 10 episodes with guests on that show, and then went through my playbook that I was giving to my clients. And I made it through myself personally. I made it through episode 3 doing all the work. And then I was like, oh, I see why they're not doing all the work, because it's a metric crap ton of work. Right. It's so much effort. And then I started thinking, okay, what is it that is making what sets the clients apart that are actually doing this work? And it was really clear. They all had a team of people that they could hand the playbook to that would implement.
Yeah.
And so then the solution to me was like, okay, if I want to continue to help my clients to do this, I need to help them build the team to do that. And so we spent the next 2 years building all the processes internally to handle and be to do what we were doing for our podcast. And so we built all those stuff and we launched it with the Hero Show. And over the course of the year following, the Hero Show did 55 episodes in a year. And I touched nothing except the actual start record button and the stop record button. And that was it. And the whole team did everything else. And I brought it to my mastermind at the end of that year. And I was like, hey, look at this cool thing that we built for ourselves. And they were like, can we buy that from you? Like right now?
Yeah.
And I was like, well, yeah, actually, we probably could turn it into a service. I was going to do it as like a thing for my clients, but we turned it into a service. We actually bought the domain name at the mastermind, Push Button Podcasts, and set up a checkout page and took our first couple of clients there at the mastermind group. And over the course of the next 5 years, we've grown it from a couple of clients to, like, we just signed our 30th show that we're managing. And, we produce several hundred pieces of content a day all over social media, everything from long form videos with podcasts, long form audios for podcasts, long form written content that we take out of the transcripts, and daily short form content for all of our clients. And we continue to build and grow and improve those processes, and really turn turn podcasts into we call it the cornerstone of all your content marketing. And for me, what I realized was, all the other things that I was helping people do was helping people get to the point where they had an offer in the marketplace and then promote that offer. And what I realized with Push Button Podcasts is that I could work with clients who already had an offer in the marketplace and scale the podcasting service. And so I wound down the other business, and we scaled up Push Button Podcasts to where it is now.
That's awesome, man. Wow. Love the journey. Love the iteration. And I love the fact that you built something, you took it to somebody, said, here, look at this. And they're like, can we buy that? And the answer is, well, yes. And you figured it out really quickly, because so many times we're like, well, let me go talk to my team and let's have a committee meeting. It's like, no, yes, you can buy that dumb thing.
Of course you can buy it.
Of course you can buy it. The answer is always yes. No. All right. So let's talk about podcasting, because my audience knows I've got a podcast. I talk about podcasting a lot. I think there are still a lot of entrepreneurs who think that it's this, they're not really sure what it is, I think, and they're scared of it because they don't know how to do it. They don't understand the content, and I've got to build a calendar, and it's going to take hours a week. And just talk about some of the low-hanging, I guess, hurdles of that stop entrepreneurs from doing it. And at the same time, talk about the impact that you've seen with your clients and yourself. And why is a podcast so, dare I say, important for a business owner, regardless of what you do? Whether you're a financial advisor, an attorney, or a plumber, you can definitely use a podcast. Explain some of that.
So we could spend hours on that, but I'll give you the short version. First, what is podcasting? So podcasting is a term that has expanded to include more than it used to, right?
Okay.
So it started off as like internet radio, right? Where just audio that was going on the internet. And what it is, the term has expanded to include any sort of episodic content, right? So sometimes it's serialized, sometimes it's fiction, sometimes it's episodic. It doesn't really matter. The idea is that it's content that's coming out on a cadence, right? And that cadence can be daily, it can be multiple times a day, it can be weekly, it could be monthly. It's content that's coming out from a creator on a cadence. And it's expanded to include, live content, right? Periscope came out, Facebook Live, TikTok Lives. Those are all, when you get out and you do a live show every Thursday, that's being included in the umbrella term podcasting now. And so any sort of episodic content is a podcast, right? And I said it might be a TikTok Live, it might be a YouTube show, it might be an audio podcast that you're doing, or it might be like what you and I are doing here, a guest interview style podcast that's going to get released on YouTube and released on the podcast things. So it's sort of a big umbrella term, and so that's what it is. And so that's the first sort of thing. The second question you're asking is what are some of the low-hanging fruit, the things that keep businesses from doing it? And the things that keep businesses from getting into podcasting is they think it's complicated. And so as a podcasting agency, we've been looking at what are the things that actually stop people from doing this work. And we've narrowed it down to 3 things mostly. This is like your 80-20. There's probably some other things that depending on the particular person that this thing or that thing is stopping them. But these 3 things, every single person. First one is having what we lovingly refer to as a mini studio. And a mini studio is just a place that when you sit down that you're going to look good and sound good every time.
Yes.
Right. And so we have a whole little thing that you can pick up on our website if you want, that's like a mini studio guide, but it's 4 things that you need: lights, camera, microphone, backdrop. And you'll see I've got those. I got 2 lights. I got a microphone in front of me. I got a camera in front of me, and I got a backdrop behind me. That's it. Super simple. You've got the same thing, it looks like, for your space: lights, camera, microphone, backdrop. And our recommendation: get small things that are not that expensive that you can set up permanently on your desk so that you can record. And it's one of those things, I call it a psychological barrier to recording. And my favorite little example of that is, I have a water flosser, right? One of those things that you fill it with water and you floss your teeth with it. I bought it. I was really excited about it. And I set it next to my sink thinking I would use it, and realized that I never did. I never actually used it because it was sitting next to my sink. But I took it and I moved it 3 feet to the right, which was into the shower. And
Yeah.
now I take a shower every day, and because it's sitting there in the shower, now I use it all the time because
Yeah.
I changed the environment. And
Right.
so when you set up a little mini studio that makes it easy for you to sit down and record, you're more likely to actually do the recordings, right?
Right.
Because you know what it's going to look like, you know it's easy to set up, and I've even been down to the point like my backdrop behind me, I set up on a curtain roller. And I like custom designed
Ah,
3D printed things and a closet bar. So like when I first was, the first 100 episodes or so for the podcast, I was like, I'd have to take my backdrop out and hang it up.
right.
And that took 2 minutes, but it was like 2 minutes of setup time. That was
Yeah.
like, it was just not easy. It could be easier. So I custom designed and 3D printed these brackets and custom built the whole thing. And now I just push a button and the backdrop falls down behind me. And so
Love
like I'm really sort of anal about that kind of like the easier it is for you to sit down and record, the more likely you are to record. And that's one of those things that stops most people from recording is they don't know how to look and sound good.
Yeah.
So take the $1,000 and buy a camera, buy a couple of lights, get a backdrop, set it up. It will pay dividends in your business if you will do that.
Yep.
That's the first one.
I love it.
Second one is not knowing what to talk about.
Yeah.
Right. I'm like, I have a business. Maybe you're a chiropractor. Maybe you're a lawyer. Maybe you are like me. We're a podcasting agency. We're a publishing agency. How do you talk about publishing ad nauseum, right?
Right.
For 300 plus episodes.
Right.
And so we have a process that we take clients through, and some like group classes that we do where we do it's called a content planning session. And we help clients go through, and you can actually map out an entire year's worth of content for your podcast in about 40 minutes if you actually know what to do. And
Yep.
so what that does is it gives you I call it a topic library, right? And now you have a topic library that anytime you sit down in front of the nice camera setup that you set up, you can just pull out a topic from your topic library and you can talk about it, right? So
Yep.
that's the second one, is having a topic library. And the third one is, now that you have a topic library and you got a nice recording thing, you got to hit the start record button and you have to actually say things. You have to know what to say. And so that third one is learning how to do a recording outline for your show, right? And I'll give you like the really short version of a recording outline. It's what, why, how, now. Here's what we're talking about today. Here's why it's important. A couple of reasons why. Here's how we're going to talk about it, like the recipe or the steps you're going to go through. And now is here's my perspective that I'm going to share on this, stories, case studies, examples, stuff like that. And here's my calls to action. Now that you understand these things, here's what you should do about it, right? Go take this action, go get into my sales funnel, do whatever the thing is. And it's a really short content outline, but you can put that onto a note card with a couple of bullet points for each one, and you can sit down and record. If you're going to do it with the guest, which I assume you probably did before we got on, like, hey, here's what we're going to talk about with Richard. Here's my couple of bullet points. You have a recording outline for your show.
Yep.
And with those three things in place, 80% of people's problems with actually sitting down to record go away.
Wow. That's amazing. I love that. And you're going to have to, not you, Richard, but you listening, need to go back and just hit the rewind button for like the last 4 minutes and just re-listen to what he just said, because this is not rocket science, right? There are some technological things and there's some things you need to know, but he just outlined so much. The topic library is what I find most just stops people in their tracks. And it's like, wow,
Yeah.
what am I going to talk about? It's like, you're an expert at whatever you do. You should be able to talk about this all day long. They
Yeah.
don't have structure.
So if you want a real basic structure for how to build a topic library, we tell people 5 categories of topics, 10 topics in each one of those categories. Those 5 categories are: 1, your 10 commandments or your core principles, right? So if you're a publisher, right, and you help people publish books, what are the 10 rules that you wish every client came in would follow to be to be successful at having a book publishing, right? And you probably have ideas popping in your head just as I've said that, right? Like every person should, they should interview their content, right? Like whatever it is, right? You have those things. I have my 10 commandments of podcasting, right? Thou shalt have, good enough production quality, lights, camera, microphone, backdrop. Thou shalt, learn to give good interview, right? I have rules for those. We have our 10 rules. That's the first one, right? Now you have 10 topics that you can build your stuff. Second one's really easy. I call them FAQs, right? Your frequently asked questions. These are the questions that are happening in your audience's head already. You're learning to enter that conversation. Stuff they're searching for on YouTube. It's the stuff they're searching for on the other one. What's it called? Google. I should know that.
That other
Yeah,
one.
stuff they're searching for on Google. If you have salespeople, it's the questions that they're fielding, right? right? If you have an intake person, right? You're a lawyer, you got an intake person. What are the questions that your intake person are picking up? If you got a car dealership, what's the questions that the receptionist is answering? Those are your FAQs. You might have more than 10. You probably have hundreds.
Right.
But anyways, get at least 10 of them. Third category, SAQs. These are should ask questions. And these are the questions that you wish your audience would ask, but they don't know to ask because they're not experts in the field, right? You probably have several of these for publishing. I've
Yeah.
got several of them for podcasting. These are the questions you should be asking yourself or should be asking your audience or should be asking whoever you're hiring to do your podcasting. Are they delivering in these ways, right? So these are the things. What you're looking for here is you're looking for stuff that you're going to shift your audience's perspective, right? And build that authority with them because you're the one who is responsible for shifting that perspective, giving them an aha moment. Fourth category, limiting empowering beliefs, right? And so limiting empowering beliefs, everyone knows success in any marketplace, doesn't matter what it is. Some portion of it is mindset. And so you can talk about what are the mindsets that are going to be, the mindsets that are holding someone back from success in your area, right? In your case for publishing, what are the things that are holding them back from publishing a book? And empowering beliefs are what are the beliefs that would propel them forward to actually getting their book published or to getting their podcast started or whatever it is. You get 5 in each of those categories. You're at 40 topics for that. And the last one is myths and truths, right? You can go through like, hey, what are the myths people believe about publishing and what's the corresponding truth that goes along with it? See if you can come up with 10 of those. If you get 10 in each of those categories, you have 50 content topics for your show. That's an entire year's worth of content. Take New Year's and Christmas off. Trust me, nobody's paying attention then anyways. We've got the data to back that up. With 30 plus shows in the marketplace. So do the 50 weeks of content. Now you have a content library.
That's great. That is so, all right. Go back and re-listen to that again. Take notes because I'm taking notes. And I'm like, that is like super simple to do. And that whole thing would take, if you sat down for an hour, you could probably knock out most of that. And to realize, even if you came up with 20, great, get started. Because what I'm sure this happens to you. When I do a podcast, Richard, I usually come up with 1 or 2 more ideas of things like, I should talk about that. There's another podcast. There's another podcast. So don't go, oh, I only came up with 38. I can't do anything. No, shut up and get going. Because it's going to come, you're going to get better at it. It's going to, in pretty soon, what I find is after you do about, I don't know, 6 or 8 shows, it starts to become kind of fun. You get addicted to this thing and it just starts opening up. And it really, what I found is podcasting is great because it's a one-on-one communication. When I listen to a podcast, I don't gather my family and my friends. I listen to it in my AirPods. It's me and you. Yeah. It allows me to get to know you, to trust you, to go, I kind of like this guy. Or I don't. But usually it's kind of like this guy because you're giving me content and stuff. And if I'm interested in what you do, I'm going to listen to your podcast over and over. And I'm going to, that's, and then I'm going to go to your website. And then I'm going to, and then
you end up in someone's head, right? They're like, you're like literally in their brain, which is fascinating. And if you look at like the type of content, the topics that I just talked about, every single one of those topic types has some sort of authority play built in. Right. Yeah. If you're talking about the 10 Commandments, if I'm the one who's defining the rules for podcasting, right? He who makes the gold makes the rules kind of thing, right? So like right. you have built-in authority that comes from that. If you are answering someone's question, right? You have the built-in like teacher authority that comes in like, hey, this is the person I'm learning from. And you'll always remember the person who taught you that thing, right? Same kind of thing. SAQs, the SAQs have that built in, like when you give someone an aha moment, you're shifting their perspective. Anytime you shift someone's perspective, that creates a, what do they call it? I can't remember the word. But it's the thing where like they'll always remember that, right? They'll always remember that thing,
like a bubble moment type thing, or a synapse fires off or something. Yeah.
There's a technical name for it. I can't remember what it is right now. But anyways, the same kind of thing. Limiting empowering beliefs. If you instill a new belief in someone, and then they change their life as a base because of that, right? If they take action on it, they'll always remember those kind of things. So you're doing a lot of that authority play in there. And so like every one of those content types is helping you build authority, to build that trust, to build that thought leadership in the marketplace.
Yeah. And the cool thing about podcasting is when somebody has that shift, it's so easy for them to share that episode with friends. And so now you're engaging with other people. I'm listening to a number of podcasts, but one of them in particular. And I shared one episode with probably about 6 or 7 people over the last 2 days because it's been so good. I thought, I think you'll like I think you'll like this one. And I just text it to people and they're like, hey, thanks, I'll check it out. That's how podcasts go viral around. So in marketing, I tell people all the time, you need to own a small pond of people. I don't need 2 billion people listening to my podcast. I need a small pond, but I need to own them They need to love me. And then they're going to share me with their friends, neighbors, relatives, business associates, church members, and expand my sphere of influence. Exactly what I'm doing with this podcast happens to business owners when they're consistent in their podcasting,
Yeah,
just like
yeah.
Rich was telling you.
So the thing that I want to point out something that's really important here, and that is it's a podcast model problem that people because the podcasting term is larger than what we are talking about,
Right.
right? It,
100%.
it encapsulates a lot of things, and so when you say podcasting, people will come to it with whatever baggage they think
Yeah.
podcasting means. And so the best way I've come to like sort of explain this for business owners like you and I is
Yeah.
that there's two different models for podcasts, right? There's the media podcast, which is where your podcast is a business, right? And
Mm-hmm.
there's some really big names in this space, and it's where because they're so big, they sort of own the term podcasting, even though
Yeah.
it's bigger than that. So your Joe Rogans, right? Your Daily Wires, your Steven Crowders, and your Tim Ferriss and stuff like that, where the podcast is a business. And
Yeah.
so when your podcast is a business, you have very specific kind of KPIs, right? You're looking for high viewership numbers because you're selling that viewership on a cost per milla for ad slots, right? Average $25 per 1,000 subscribers. If you got 1,000 subscribers and you do 2 ad slots, you're making $50 per episode. If you've
Yeah.
got 1 million subscribers like Joe Rogan and you have 4 ad slots, you're making major bank,
Yeah.
right? And so like, and you have an entire production team and you have a whole production schedule, you have a whole thing. The podcast is a business. The second form, the one that we talk about, is we call it a strategic influence podcast. And it's same kind of medium, but the purpose is different. And
Yeah.
so for us, we are looking at how do we use the podcast to drive people into an existing business, right? So it's a marketing wing for an existing business.
Yeah.
And so that's the strategic influence podcast. And your KPIs are different, right? I'm looking for when I get on the intake call with someone, how did you hear about me?
Mm-hmm.
Right? I couldn't get away from you on Facebook. Every single day I saw one of your little short reels talking about podcasting and I wanted to talk more to you, right? Or
Yeah.
your lawyers, same kind of thing, right? You're talking about law every day for 6 months. And I finally was like, I had a problem where one of my friends recommended you to me because they saw you all the time,
That's right.
right? And what's interesting to me is my podcast, the Hero Show, it is not actually related to Push Button Podcasts. It's a client of Push Button Podcasts, but I run it personally.
Yeah.
That podcast drove over $250,000 in sales to Push Button Podcasts this last year.
Yeah.
Our average viewership, maybe 500 or 600 people a week.
Yeah.
Right. Because I don't even have my 1,000 true fans yet. And it
Right.
drives
We don't
massive
know.
revenue into my business.
That's right. It does. And that's what business owners need to understand is your podcast can be I call it a profitable podcast when you understand the right model. I love strategic influence because that's really what you're trying to do with it, and setting it up so that you can share great information, have phenomenal guests, engage with your audience, and gain more clients. That to me is the primary purpose for a strategic influence podcast, because most of my clients aren't Joe Rogan, right?
Yeah.
And so you need to think differently. Just because they're doing it doesn't mean that's the model you should use. You should be using this model. It's the same model we use as well in our business. It's what we teach our clients to do. I just teach them at a real high level. I don't have all the gizmos and gadgets and team that you have. That's why you're here. So, well, I mean, dude, we could talk for hours. I love this because, as I said at the beginning, you and I cross paths in a lot of areas, and this is just one of them. Because all right, let me ask you this question. This is a softball. Ready? Here it comes. Is there any type of business owner that you and I would be working with that couldn't or shouldn't be considering doing a podcast?
Yes.
Okay.
So there's two categories that I don't think are super useful for podcasting. So category number one, and so let me back up a little bit. Podcasts and content marketing in general, and this probably even extends to your publishing as well, because
Mhm.
it fits into the content marketing world. So anytime you're talking content marketing becomes more effective when the longer your buyer's journey is or the higher the ticket price is. And so, if you look at like the hot crazy scale that they talk about, like the further you get into the high ticket price and the longer buyer's journey, the more effective content marketing is. So if you are a local restaurant who is sitting next to a freeway, and like you will probably be better served by having a big ass billboard next to the freeway that says exit
Yeah.
here if you're hungry, right? Because it's a short buyer's cycle and it's a low ticket price.
Yeah.
But if you're in anything where you have days or weeks or even months that go into the buyer's journey, regardless of ticket price, content marketing will work really, really well for you. Or if you're in a high ticket price, right, where someone's going to drop 500, 1,000, 10,000, $100,000 to work with you,
Yeah.
you should, that one in particular, you should absolutely be doing some sort of content marketing. You should probably have a podcast, and you should have a book, and you should have a website. You should be on all the social channels, because the buyer's journey will be long and the trust has to be high. And
Yeah.
so that's the one. The first one is if you're in low ticket price, short buyer's journey, there's probably more effective marketing channels for you. And then the second one is if you are early or pre-revenue, content marketing is probably not your first step unless you have more time than money,
Yeah.
right? And you're just willing to do all the work for it. Because like on average for a podcast, you're looking at 10 to 15 hours per episode to do everything right.
Yeah.
Right. Which is why my clients weren't doing it. Right. They weren't doing the things, because a lot of them we were helping them start their business. So they were pre-revenue, early revenue, to get their offer in the marketplace. So when we were helping someone who had an existing business add an educational wing, they already had revenue, they could invest into building all of that. It worked well for them. And so generally speaking, especially if you're going to hire someone else to do it, hire someone like us,
Yeah.
you should have revenue coming in. You should probably be doing direct response marketing. You should know what your numbers are. You should know where which ads and messaging works well. And so if you are, I always liken business to raising a child, right? So you got like baby
Okay.
business and toddler business, and then child business and preteen and teenager. And, eventually you're trying to get your business to the point where it's an adult business. It can survive, without you for a week without like, burning down the house. So if you think your business would, burn down the house without you for a couple of weeks, you're probably too early for a podcast. And so those are my two categories of like, maybe you're not ready for it yet. And that's
Yeah.
not a problem. It's not saying that it wouldn't be beneficial. It would absolutely be beneficial, but your cost
Right.
and time, your business may not be able to afford yet.
Right. And there may be a better marketing channel for you right now. Yeah.
Yes.
And that's good. That's great counsel, because that's what business owners, as part of the strategy of marketing. I was just on a coaching call, and one of the guys said, "Oh, I'm getting ready to launch my YouTube channel, and we got to go." And I'm meeting with a guy, and I said, "Why are you doing YouTube right now? I think we need to do these other two things before you do that, in
Yeah.
order to make that more effective." And he's like, "Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
because everybody's telling him, do YouTube, everybody's on
Yeah.
YouTube."
YouTube is great. And podcasts are great. Books are great. You know what's better? Knowing what your offer is and knowing how your audience, knowing what your message is in the marketplace. Because if you
Dude.
go to YouTube and you go to a podcast and you go to a book and you don't know what the message you're bringing to the marketplace is, you're too early.
Absolutely. And it kills your credibility in my mind. It's like, who is this guy? What? No, yeah. So, no, I love it. All right. And instead of talking for another 20 or 30 or 40, 50 minutes, where can people find you? Push Button Podcasting, because what you all do is you make it so simple for a business owner. You don't just say, well, here's your podcast. You guide them, you help them. Where do they take that next step? Because they're probably tired of me asking you questions, and they're like, Delon, where can I go?
Yeah, so you can find us at pushbuttonpodcasts.com. If you click the little, I think it either says book a demo or book a strategy session, you can click that button on there. It'll actually put you directly on either my calendar or one of our strategist calendars, and we can talk with you. And essentially what we do is we help people do, we make podcasting push button simple, right? The idea is that we'll help you set up your studio. We'll help you do the content planning. We'll help you build that content library. We'll help you do the content outlining for all of that during the onboarding. We'll help you build a consistent brand all the way through your show. So your podcast and everything that we do is on brand. It's on point. You understand your message. You know who you're talking to, and it all looks good in the marketplace. And then the actual distribution on a regular basis. We're going to help you take this episode that you're recording, like what you and I are doing. As soon as you hit stop record, our team actually does everything. You don't even have to give us the files. Our team will get notified when you hit stop record, and we do all the video editing, we do all the audio editing, we do all of the written content, we do all the graphic content, we do all the social media content, so that you end up with a YouTube channel that's getting published to every week. You end up with a podcast channel that's getting published to on all the major channels. So Amazon, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. You end up with a blog post that's getting published onto your blog every single week. And you end up with daily social content that's going out on TikTok, Facebook, Reels, Instagram, YouTube, Shorts, LinkedIn, and Instagram for all the major channels every single day. And so that's what we do. That's what we call it push button podcast, because you push start record, you push stop record, we'll do everything else.
Wow. Push Button Podcasts with an S.com. I'm going to have that in the show notes. I really want you to pause and go back and re-listen to everything after you go and book the call with him. but just re-listen to this. There's so much in this one episode that will help you on your journey to being an influencer to your audience and really driving more revenue.
I have one more thought for people
Okay.
before you actually kill this, and that is not kill it before you hit stop record. And that's for businesses that are not in what I call the cutting edge marketing spaces, right? So if you're, coaching, consulting, course creation, podcasters like us, content creators, we're all sort of cutting edge marketing stuff where like, everyone's doing content creating, they're all doing podcasting. But if you're in the in any business that's a little bit further back on the adoption curve,
Yeah.
you're a lawyer, you're an accountant, you're a doctor, you're a chiropractor, you're a pest control company, or anything in those places where like you're not on the cutting edge of marketing and you start doing this work, you will be the only one in your town that's doing it and it will absolutely crush for you.
Yes.
So, that's just like the flip side of who shouldn't do it, who should.
Yeah.
If you
Well, no,
any of those businesses.
100%. And that leads me back to who should be doing a podcast is almost every business that's listening to us, because there's so much value in being consistent, having your message everywhere, and influencing your audience. Richard, man, thank you. This has been amazing. I'm going to put everything in the show notes so they know where to get you. And
Yeah, absolutely.
I pray that you guys have safe journeys as an itinerant entrepreneur, living the dream and running your business virtually. Thanks for being my guest here, brother.
Thanks for having me here.
You are welcome. I'm going to end this podcast by a simple push of a button. So go see Richard, pushbuttonpodcasts.com.